Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to Tex Messages. My name is Rick Tex. Today is March 8th, 2018, and we're still in the dark throngs of winter. Today we're going to be discussing a little bit about backyard hens and raising chickens, things of that nature. That's one of those activities that's people are usually always on the fence about it because they think of hens as some dirty farm animals that walk around in their own urine and crap all day and are a nuisance to the neighborhood. But in all reality, they are they're obviously not indoor pets, but they are for the most part fairly domesticated. So they're good pets to have around. Well, I mean, not really as pets, but as animals to where you can attain nourishment from them along with just having fun when they're around, and they'll hang out with you when you're outside and things of that nature too. But the first step you want to follow when you're thinking about getting new hens and chickens is ordinance laws, or maybe they're not technically laws, but ordinances, rules you got to follow, neighborhood citizen justice. So anyone out in the country, it's not a big deal. I'm sure you can probably have chickens anywhere out there. But say you live in any type of township, municipality, if you're in one of those houses where you got to pay the association fees, if you're in an apartment or a townhome, then go to the city website or just go to the local community task force, whatever it's called, and browse the website and try to figure out the laws and the rules. Personally, as far as laws go, I'm more of the Big Ten kind of guy. I mean, I follow the Big Ten, and from that, as soon as I open up any kind of book about laws, ordinances, my eyes just totally glaze over, and nothing ever gets done. So, if you're like that, it's a bit of a challenge to navigate the ordinance rules, but for the most part, if you go to the city website, there'll probably be somewhere in there where there'll be about 50 chapters about ordinances, so then you gotta find the one about animals or farm animals or animals that are allowed, and then you gotta find one what your zone is and what's allowed, what's not allowed, and for the most part, it might take you a few days to figure it out, but I mean, if you're really confused, just send an email to somebody at the city, or maybe even just go down to the city hall in the first place and talk to somebody there, because they're probably going to know what to do. Or they'll just make it up, and then you'll feel good about thinking they know what they're doing. Because in Otsego, in Elk River here, when I went down to the city hall, it's like $20, lifetime chicken license, no problem. It was super easy to do. They don't have some inspectors come out and look at everything and make sure everything is up to spec, and they just don't even mess with it. It's all of the enforcement of animals is based on just calls only. So if your animals are nice and friendly, and even if you don't have a permit, as long as nobody calls and complains, there's not going to be any problems. But if you get some rogue animal or some rogue hen that wants to run around and tear apart the neighborhood, then people complain, you're probably going to have to get rid of it, or bring it to a farm, or do something with it. But for probably 95% of hens, you're not going to have a problem with them. There might be a problem if when they first arrive, they are agitated and they want to find a spot to lay their eggs, so they'll make funny noises, and if there's other times of the year too where they're scared or something, then they'll also make some weird, annoying noises. But by and large, I'd say 90% of the time, it's a total non-factor. It's just a win-win. It adds tranquility to the neighborhood. The neighbors all think it's pretty cool. They're like, yeah, that guy's got chickens running around his yard. That's awesome. It's probably better than barking dogs or some neighborhood cat that tears up the neighborhood, all the flowers in the neighborhood or something along those lines. So they are very good animals too. And you know, if the whole permit thing is a little too perplexing and confusing, you can probably just get the hands, just use common sense when you get an enclosure or a fence or wherever you plan on putting them. You know, even if you live in an apartment. This one kid told me a while back, he knew somebody that did maintenance on these apartments in St. Cloud. There are some apartments that are close to the campus, but oddly enough, nobody that actually went to college lived in the apartments. And he said that some of the residents in that apartment actually raised chickens in the apartment because they would then use the eggs or butcher them or something. So they had a little room partitioned off, and I don't know if they put plastic everywhere or what they did, but yeah, as far as excrement, there's definitely going to be a lot of issues with chickens because they have no concept of a litter box or to use the great outdoors for relieving themselves. So I mean, if you were to literally take a chicken's theory of where to leave excrement and put that into a human, it'd be akin to crapping in your bed and then laying in it and sleeping in it. So it is probably the biggest issue as far as owning hens, is just to address that issue of excrement and waste, and you can use it to compost too. So it's pretty easy to deal with. Personally, I got it set up where initially when I first got it, just started out with 2 hens. I mean, it's 3 hens now, so it's not some enormous leap of faith there. Started out with 2 hens, and there's just a little 2 by 3 foot enclosure. It had a perch way up high so they could sit up there, and that's usually where they want to sleep. When they do sleep, they'll seek out higher ground. Send them a higher ground, and then they'll feel safe from predators, both on the ground, and they also prefer overhead shelter all times of the day, so they feel safe from aerial predators. Those are the ones that cause them the most pain or the most consternation and fear. If you do have free range chickens, they won't be free range unless they feel safe when they're outside. Because if they're just walking around outside and then there's no overhead protection and there's an airplane, that they're going to tear off and run to the first sign of overhead shelter they can find. It's basically ingrained in their systems that they need the overhead protection. And that is, you might be able to make scarecrows and other, chicanery to fool the overhead predators, but by and large, I found it's just better it gives you an excuse to be outside more often. Even if you're just doing mundane tasks like digging up your garden or sun tanning, reading outside, maybe listening to Good Times, Balls Deep if you're on your podcast and you just want to sit outside and relax. It's perfect for that. Plus then the chickens can forage through the grass and weeds and garden and find some more good, delicious, healthy food that'll then translate into the eggs for better health as well. That's another thing too. When you feed your chickens, there's certain types of food that you can give them. They have the food that they sell at Fleet Farm or Big Joe Rosso's Feed and Seed. That type of food, the main type of food that's like in the 50-pound bags and costs $10. If you look at the ingredients, it's corn, soybean oil, and then a bunch of other stuff. They don't prefer that. They'll eat that as an absolute last resort probably before death. So I mean, soybeans, I think they're like made to be industrial lubricants. So I don't even quite understand how they're food grade yet. Like the tofu and such is highly fermented and has all those other properties in it, so that's probably what makes it healthy for consumption. But I mean, chickens are they're not super finicky, but if they're free range or you let them run young, wild, and free, then they'll definitely seek out food of good quality. Mostly what I've found is that they seek out higher protein and fatty foods. Because if I have a bowl of compost and I bring it outside and I just dump it in there unceremoniously in their shed, they'll be able to specifically pick out a peanut that I might have dropped on the floor. They'll see that right away and go after it. There'll be like 3 of them running on top of each other trying to be the first to peck the peanut, to eat the peanut, because that'll be the only, they'll somehow recognize amongst all the scraps that that is an edible food source and a good, clean food source as well. So, I mean, they absolutely, they seem to prefer nuts and seeds and worms over, corn and soy and whatever else the cheap type of feed is. That the corn and soybean oil, it's probably for if you got hundreds of chickens and you're just trying to feed them as cheaply as possible, and just trying to get eggs just so you have eggs to hold in your hand and sell. But if you're not really concerned about quality, you just want to dump them off at a Cub Foods or an Aldi or something, then that's mostly what the corn and soybean oil is for. But if I take a trip down to Menards, and assuming I don't get in any road rage or get shot or arrested on the way there, once I arrive at Menards, I'll generally buy food for the hens that just has nuts and seeds in it. So it's basically like feeding the hens the Atkins diet. I mean, there's very little carbohydrates because it's mostly sunflower seeds, the black oil sunflower seeds. Then it's the peanuts is a big thing, mostly sunflower seeds and peanuts. Then there's like pistachios and cashews, but I think they're mostly just trace amounts of that because those are fairly expensive products too. So to buy them for chickens, is it really worth it? Maybe. Peanuts are pretty affordable though. So peanuts you can definitely buy for chickens. That's cheap enough to where it'll be a healthy source. They'll enjoy it, they'll love life, and then that'll be their preferred food of choice. Another thing too that they really love though is the mealworms. Mealworms, they go crazy over mealworms. When you feed them the other type of seeds and feed, they'll kind of look around and think, this looks like some pretty decent stuff, but if you got the mealworms, that would be highly preferred. But mealworms are they're not super expensive, but they are pretty expensive. It's probably $8 for a pound worth of mealworms, and in all reality, as far as calories go, it doesn't go a long way with chickens. So it's mostly one of those. It's what I found, it works good if you want to coop up the hens before nighttime and they're not in the coop yet. It's one of them things that you can use to lure them into the coop. That way, then they'll want to, spend the rest of the night in there once you shut the door down. Then the other thing too. So the food, mostly fats and proteins are what they seem to prefer. And as far as shelter goes, I used to have them in this little 2 by 3 foot shed, and then there's a perch and then the nesting box. But then I shifted it to it's an 8 by 8 foot shed, and then the floor is dirt, just all dirt. They want the dirt so that they can roll around in the dirt. We call it dust bathing, and what that does is it gets rid of all the fleas and ticks and parasites on their feathers and things of that nature. And then the other thing they like to do too is scratch the dirt. So when you feed them food, I usually just dump it in the dirt. It'll give them an excuse to follow their natural instinct of foraging for food and digging out the dirt and trying to locate it within the dirt. What that also does too is it helps to cut down on their claws. Because if they don't scratch the ground, what's going to happen is their claws are going to grow very long. It's basically like human fingernails. You don't cut your fingernails, they just continue growing. It's one of them things where it's made to wear out and then they regrow. Because one time I had a gold hen had a bumblefoot on one of its talons, So it's basically a staph infection. It just turns, it looks like to be about the size of a marble. And what it is when the old coop I had, it was set up pretty high up, so they had to jump down in the ground. So what happens there is if they hit the ground and they were to somehow puncture their talon and create a hole, it's ripe for infection. And then the staph gets in there, it starts building up and accumulating, and one of the ways you can tell is if they're limping. That's the only way I could tell. Because otherwise you can routinely pick them up and flip them over, look at the bottom of their talons and see, oh yep, yeah, that's a clean bill of health. But for the most part, if they start limping, then you know there's something wrong. And the other thing too is they won't scratch the ground with that claw, and then the claw will start getting really long. So that's probably another indicator too. I mean, if your chickens just naturally lay around, and if you see one of the claws getting pretty long, then it might be time to pick it up and flip it over and see if there's some type of infection or a marble size attachment to their talon. The other issue too was it was scratching its neck with that same bumblefoot, and then the feathers on its neck were starting to fall off. So it started to look pretty bad, because if that infection would spread throughout the whole hen, it would have a pretty high likelihood of meeting a sudden death. Or not a sudden, but maybe more of a slow death. So the onus was on me to remove the staph, because it's not, it maybe can remove itself, but it's easy enough just to get, your little hobby knife and grab the chicken, throw a towel over it or something, do all the disinfection stuff, hydrogen peroxide, alcohol. Pretty much everybody I know has a good supply of alcohol on hand. So alcohol definitely should work, and there's a few other things too. I mean, you just go to a local first aid store and just buy a bunch of random stuff and go at it with all guns. People are going to tell you this works, that works, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. So I just applied the method of going at it all guns blazing. It seemed to work out for me. So what I did is I grabbed the chicken. Well, you put the towel over its head, preferably a dark towel. Animals, when they, like when you watch the crocodile hunter, they throw a towel over it so the crocodile doesn't jump around and try to bite people's legs off. So chickens are the same way. If you put a towel over them, it's more of a tranquilizer. I mean, if you want to shoot the chicken up with drugs and, try to soothe it or allay it or whatever, you can, I guess, but I wouldn't really recommend it, because all you gotta do is pick it up, throw a blanket, hold it tight, sort of cradle it, and then you got your left hand, or if you want to cradle with your left hand, use your right hand to do the surgery. Either or works. So once you cradle, it may squirm a little bit too, but just, if you squeeze it to a certain point, then it won't even try to squirm. I mean, if you squeeze it a little bit, then it will, maybe not will, but depending on the chicken, they all have their own unique characteristics. So if you squeeze it fairly hard, it's probably not gonna move after that. They have this weird instinct to them where if they're in pain, then they won't make noise, or they won't, jump around and cause a ruckus, because that indicates to predators that they're in danger and vulnerable. So that makes performing surgery on them a rather, not really an easy task, but it mitigates some of the difficulties that you would think would occur when performing such an action. So you basically cradle the hen, take your knife, do all the disinfection stuff, you cut a little hole, squeeze it out, the bumblefoot will generally come out right away. And then just tape it up, put more disinfection on it, and then call it good. I mean, the chicken will maybe peck at the Band-Aid for a little bit, but it's not going to be a big deal. They don't really have a whole lot of nerve or pain receptors on that part of their body, because they're scratching the ground all day, so if they felt pain from that, they'd basically always be in pain while they're scratching the ground. therefore it's not a monumental task if you do see that one of your hens has the bumblefoot. But for the most part, we're gonna have to go on break pretty soon here. And before we do, I want to make sure to plug for a future show we have. It's going to be called Good Times Balls Deep. I mean, I've just been more than exhilarated for this show. I mean, I think in the past 3 days I've probably had a total of 5 hours of sleep maybe. So I mean, we're just going pretty much balls deep and 100 miles per hour. And I think one of these days probably just going to hit a wall and then go to sleep for 48 hours. But see, the other day I was brainstorming with the future host of Good Times Balls Deep, and it just baffles me because I had these ideas in my head, and then he sort of sends me an idea. It's more, he's not really talking to me, it's more he's sending a probe, and with that probe he can pretty much read exactly what I'm thinking and know what I'm thinking and reply to it before I can even reply to his statement. So I mean, he might be telepathic. I mean, I'm not claiming he's telepathic, but he's as close to I've seen it as far as, a entity in carnal form. So I mean, I think you're going to be blown away by his show. I mean, I can't even use words to describe how excited I am for Good Times Balls Deep, and he's excited for it too. He's been, my phone has been lighting up all day with texts and calls and things like that. So I mean, I'm just really pumped. But we're gonna be back in about 3 minutes here. Thanks for listening. You're listening to Tex Messages with your parasite Rick Tex. Welcome back to Tex Messages. I'm Rick Tex, the Parasite. Today is March 8th, 2018. I'm glad to be broadcasting to you from central Minnesota in Elk River. Just give you a perspective, Elk River is probably about 30 minutes northwest of the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, and it's probably about 30 minutes southeast of St. Cloud. So it's very centrally located within central Minnesota. If you were to put Minnesota on say a top, for example, or an axle of some sort, Elk River may not quite be the center, but the center balance, but probably a little bit more north of Elk River, because there is a very northerly, you got the North Woods in Minnesota. It's about 3 hours north of here. It's just a vast, abundant natural resource. There's a lot of fun things to do up there. You got Duluth, Ely, Hibbing, the Iron Range, Bemidji, International Falls. All the good hockey teams are up there. War Road, Warsaw. Then you got Lake of the Woods and Leech Lake. All that good, fun entertainment in the spring and summer. But that's mostly probably summertime. In springtime, the weather is a little unpredictable, and it always seems to rain on the weekends too. So, I mean, imagine that, huh? You never really understand weather patterns until you're a dirt track racing fan. Then you can always tell that it's meant to rain on Friday nights or Saturday nights, depending on which tracks you go to. Or if you go to all of them, then it rains every night. Mostly in the spring though. Summertime it slows down a lot though. The weather patterns are a lot more consistent. So then when you do plan your vacations up in Ely or Duluth or International Falls, summertime is an excellent time to plan them. Plus, a lot of people just are naturally inclined to take vacation then too. I suppose that makes the vacation more congested, but I mean, if you're going up to Big Bear Country and there's hardly anybody within 5 miles, then who cares if there's not going to be people around you anyways. And I'm thinking someday I probably will do a show about Duluth or Two Harbors or just that area. It's a really wonderful, great part of the state. Just a beautiful place to visit every once in a while. I mean, you don't have to drive up there every weekend or something, but just to go up there, once every 5, 10, 20 years or so. It's always a good time. And it's not always balls deep, but it's usually a good time. All right, getting back to the hens here, I think one of the issues is how are you initially going to attain the hens? Do you want to start with the little babies, which are probably nature's cutest animal as a young one? I mean, they're about the size of a tennis ball. They basically make a little chirp and they sprint around and they jump over each other and they just do the funniest, most hilarious things ever. So if you wanted to get a little baby hen, you could, and then just raise it inside for a couple months. And then if you already have hens outside, there is a specific way to introduce new hens to the brood, or whatever you want to call it. The gang of hens, the ye merry band of hens. What I did when I had 2 hens. They had their own little pecking order. There's a gold hen, brown hen, and then I introduced a speckle hen. The golden brown hen, the Minnesota Golden Gophers. They're kind of themed after that. What their initial pecking order was, gold hen would peck brown hen. So when I would introduce a new hen, the important thing was not to have speckle hen on the low end of the pecking order, but to create a pecking revolution. So each hen pecked another hen, and each hen got pecked by another hen. That way, if you introduce a new hen, they're not going to gang up on it and then possibly kill it in worst case scenario. But for they'll definitely make life miserable for the new hen. I don't even know what the objective is behind that. I mean, you think an animal's natural proclivity would just be to work together with their friends, family, neighbors, community, and all that. But yeah, going back. Okay, what I did when I got the new hen, speckled hen, the first thing I did is I had it in a container. I introduced it to gold hen. Gold hen was the aggressive one, kind of the mean one. So I kept speckled hen in the container, So when gold hen tried to viciously attack speckled hen, gold hen would just hit the container. I mean, gold hen didn't know what the hell was going on. Gold hen thought she was hitting a force field. You know, she thought maybe speckled hen had some shielding capabilities, like the Borg or the Romulans or the Kardashians. So she was just like, the hell is going on here? I mean, I'm not going to mess with this chicken. This chicken will whoop up on my ass, and then I'll turn into, you know, a soup later on in the day. So what happened is gold hen tried to attack speckled hen. Gold hen hit the force field. So gold hen ran away. You know, gold hen didn't know what the hell to think. So then brown hen is kind of poking around, thinking, I wonder what's going on. This is kind of weird. So then at that point, I unceremoniously dump speckled hen out, because if both the hens are afraid of the new hen, then, you know, then they're going to be lower on the pecking order, and then there's no pecking cycle or revolution. So what I did is I unceremoniously dumped speckled hen right in front of brown hen. So right away, brown hen jumps on speckled hen and tries to attack her and make all these weird, funny noises, and basically establishes superiority, or whatever you call it, right away. So at that point, speckled hen is like, all right, you know, I guess this brown hen can probably beat me up or whatever, so I won't mess with her. But this other hen that keeps running away from me, I could probably beat him up. So what I ended up getting is speckled hen would peck gold hen pecks brown hen pecks speckled hen. You know, it's just a perfect match. But the unfortunate part is, though, the idea behind that is that they all stay on the same perch. If you have multiple perches, then they're going to settle based on their pecking order. But if they got a pecking cycle, then the hope is that they stay on the same perch. But that doesn't appear to be happening, because what happens is gold and brown hen will be on the higher perch, and then speckled hen will be on the lower perch, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, especially in wintertime. It just seems better for them just to all bundle up together and conserve their heat and not have to, to deal with wasting excessive energy just to stay warm, and they can just all, cuddle up and bundle together. So when you're introducing new hens, you definitely just try out the pecking cycle. It may work, it may not, but just give it a shot. If you do want to initiate by getting bigger hens, you can always go on Craigslist or just go to a local farm and they'll sell you a few hens, or go to the farm store and they got some decent sized hens too that are pretty much laying right away. So you can just take them and you pretty much hit the ground running. That's probably the easiest way to go, but most people you consult with will definitely recommend starting off with the little baby hens, just so that you can go through the whole process, watching them grow up, and then if you play with them a lot, they'll have more of an attachment to you, so they'll feel more pet friendly, and they won't run away from you. And if you have to do surgery on them, they're easy to catch and grab and do things of that nature. So personally, when I got two hens that are already full grown, and most people are going to tell you this, if they did it over again, they get the little baby hens right away. Just raise them and get them in. You can get them probably about 2 months before spring, and just raise them inside. And after the 2 months, then they should be ready to run around young, wild, and free. And probably about 2 to 3 months, then they'll be ready to lay eggs. One of the ways you can tell when they're ready to lay eggs is if you sort of reach down, they'll squat, or they'll lift up their wings and squat down a little bit. Then you know that they're probably laying eggs. So if you got a good spot for them to lay eggs, they're pretty easy to find. But if you can tell that they're doing the squatting thing, but you're not finding eggs anywhere, they're probably laying them somewhere, but you're just not able to locate them, or they lay them and some other animal comes and eats them before you locate them. So that's probably another thing to consider too. What I found is when they lay their eggs, they prefer, over at shelter of course, some type of comfortable material, leaves, straw, grass, hay. I use leaves just because during the fall you can pick up a whole bunch of leaves and then just stick them somewhere, and then they'll just lay in the leaves, no problem. Some of them do have light brown eggs. And I've seen light brown, white, light green, dark darkish black, or pretty much all colors of the rainbow as far as eggs go. I mean, not like pink or fluorescent orange or anything like that, but there is a lot more variety than what you may be led to believe based on the available supplies in the stores. So that's another thing to consider too. I mean, different hens lay different types of eggs. They have different frequency of when they lay the eggs, the different size of the eggs is, different times of the year. Well, actually, they pretty much lay them all times of the year. But we're running a little late here. I'm going to have to go on break. And before I do that, I just want to make sure to remind you guys that we're going to have Good Times Balls Deep coming up in the very near future. The host of the show is just, I mean, he's completely ebullient. He's super excited. He's making it sound like this might be a life-changing occurrence for him. And I mean, as excited as I am about this show, I mean, I think he's just exponentially more excited, which is going to translate it into the ladies and gentlemen viewing at home. You guys are definitely going to be in for a big treat. There's no question in my mind you'll enjoy it. It's just a matter of if you enjoy it too much. I mean, you know, I'm going to have to pull back on the reins just because of all the winning that's been going on and all the winning that I anticipate with Good Times Balls Deep. So I'm definitely, sometimes that's the hardest part too. I mean, you think you can just get super excited about things and everything's all fun and games and everything is going to work out, but eventually you do have to come down. I mean, the last few days, it feels like I've been to the point where if I took enough tranquilizers to put down an elephant, I mean, I might be able to sleep for a few hours. That's just how, you know, pumped up I am for Good Times Balls Deep. So, I mean, the audience at home, I don't think, you guys definitely aren't going to regret it. But stay tuned because we still haven't yet announced a debut date, and the host of Good Times Balls Deep is coming up with just a lot of brilliant ideas. I think what's probably going to happen is he's probably just going to come up with so many great ideas, and the hardest part is just going to be finding out which direction we're going to go to, because it's literally going to be coming up to an intersection, and then there's about 8 roads. So I mean, where do you go? We're just going to have to come to the point where we're just pick a road and go. And then wherever it leads us, it leads us. That's, yeah, there's so many challenging aspects that you don't really consider, and that's certainly one of them. So, yeah, it should be it should be very fun when that happens. Thanks for listening. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. This is Rick Tex. You're listening to Tex Messages. I just got off the phone with the host of Good Times Balls Deep. He's just been, these ideas have just been flying at us at Mach 4. So I mean, I don't even know how we're all gonna get them on paper, but we're gonna just try to do the best we can with the crew we got. But I mean, he's just a supernaturally gifted talent. So I think any direction we go will be a positive one, and you, the viewing audience, will definitely be the winners, along with us too. I mean, we're already feeling the winning. So once Good Times Balls Deep really hits the pedal to the metal, and flies into corner one, going 120 miles per hour, running the top cushion, it's definitely gonna not only make Minnesota great again, but probably just good old American fun, making America great again. Just doing our part, It's like I'm not really good at anything else in life. I'm not even good at talking or speaking. It's just you got to do something though. You got to do something with your life. And if you can't, you're not going to be able to be the best of the best, but at least be your best. If that's the one thing you can get away from today's podcast, then congratulations. Put yourself to the test, be the best of the best. Now, getting back to the hens here. Alright, sorry, every time I talk to the host of Good Times Balls Deep, it's like my heart, it's not, due to some, my heart gets like 150 miles, I can't even think straight anymore, it's just, I'm just super pumped for the show. That's all I can say about it. But getting back to the hens, the whole objective behind, maybe not the whole objective, but one of the primary objectives with hens is the eggs. Eating the eggs, how you plan to eat the eggs, what do you plan to use them for. What you should check first is to make sure you're not allergic to eggs. Make sure you can eat the eggs. They're healthy. They're going to be healthy. That your body can handle them. The microbiotics in your system love them. They want them. But some people are allergic to eggs. So these tests you take don't necessarily prove it or not. And then the eggs in the store too are more or less an entirely different. They're eggs, yes, in a technical term. But as far as all the chemicals and the minerals and vitamins inside of them, they're completely different than your pasture-raised, home-raised hens. So you might eat eggs from the store and then you feel like you're sick or you're bloated or you get brain fog or you puke or get diarrhea from the eggs in the store, and you might think, well, I can't eat eggs, I'm allergic to them. But try buying eggs from a local farmer first and experimenting with them. It might be the opposite effect too. You might eat eggs at the store, feel just fine and feel great, feel rejuvenated, feel like taking on the world, being the best of the best. But then you switch to the farmer eggs, there might be some type of nutrients or enzymes or biotics within the farm eggs that don't jive with your system. And it could be due to what the farmer's feeding them or how they're raising them or if the animals are under stress or things of that nature too. So it's really challenging because you can't really technically find out if your own pasture, grass-raised, grass-fed, cage-free eggs will be healthy unless you actually get them and try them out. And it might be different between different hens too. So one hen, you might eat the eggs and feel violently ill. The other hen, you might eat an egg and feel perfectly fine. So it's just experiment. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, using a foregone conclusion that you are going to get hens, they are going to lay eggs, you will eat the eggs. If you do eat the eggs and you do experience some type of ailment or illness, then that's fine. It doesn't mean you're compelled to eat them because it's available. You went through all the problem. You went through all the hassle of constructing a shelter and giving them love and all that other stuff that you feel like you have to eat them because they're there and they're available. You don't really have to. Just stick them in a container. Maybe distribute them to some neighbors. See if they like them. Or I suppose the last thing you want to do is distribute them to a neighbor, and if their neighbors feel like they're getting ailments out of them too, then they might feel compelled to still take them from you. But I don't know, it's definitely a tricky game, and you really want to use your own judgment because eggs aren't for everybody. Because even me personally, sometimes I've been trying all different types of methods of eating eggs. I boil them and it felt like it didn't quite agree with my system. And then, you try scrambling them. That was kind of the same way too. So lately I've been trying to eat them raw, but it seems like I'm still having the recurring problems. And I'm very particular about what I eat. I had 2 surgeries on my intestines when I was young. I was basically probably about halfway in death's doorstep. So my digestive tract is basically a train wreck. It's got a rap sheet: lactose intolerant, glucose intolerant, probably basically undiagnosed diabetes. I mean, I essentially just eat the Atkins diet now. 5 or 6 days a week, and then 1 or 2 days a week I load up on carbohydrates. And I'll get into that later on, because I feel like I'm uniquely qualified. I'm basically the canary in the coal mine for normal functioning people. And we'll get into that in later shows. But when you're consuming these eggs, just make sure they're healthy for you. That's probably the most important part. Because you don't want to just be raising chickens and spending all that time and money on food and everything, and then find out that your child is getting sick from the eggs, or you're getting sick from the eggs. So you definitely should keep that in mind. And another thing too, I don't want to say owning hens is like owning children or you're having children, but there is a little bit of responsibility. For example, you're gonna have to, unless you leave them locked up all day, you're gonna want to let them run around outside or underneath some overhead shelter. And then at night, they'll come back, they'll go up to their perch, and then wherever their shelter is, you'll want to close the door and lock it up. Otherwise, there will be predators, vermin that'll come and eat them or try to eat them. And me personally, I leave some type of security camera out. So if an animal does come and try to break into the chicken coop at 2 o'clock in the morning, probably within about 1 minute, they're going to have some naked guy running after them. So if there's any deterrent to breaking into the hen coop, I think that would have to be it. That's about the most I can do. I can maybe try to set up some lasers to shoot at animals that try to break in, but it's too risky to do that. I'd rather just take the old-fashioned approach, guns to blazing, running after them, chasing them down, making sure they never attempt that chicanery ever again. So for you, the other thing, I've owned hens for probably about 8 months, and I've never forgot to close the door. I don't know if it's some paternalistic instinct or guardian instinct, but you absolutely, if you forget to close the door one time, that's all it takes. Then they're all gone, and you're completely 100% to blame. It'd be like if God one day just decided, you know what, I think I'm just not going to let the sun rise today. And the sun doesn't rise, and then the temperature goes to 50 below and everybody dies on Earth. You obviously don't want to compare yourself to the Almighty, but to those hens, to their world, you basically are their God or goddess, and you're entirely responsible for their safety. When you adopt an animal like that, you have to uphold that responsibility. It's not, I'll toss them in a coop and, if I feel like opening the door, I will, but if I want to go up to Duluth for 3 days, then I'll just leave. Ever since I've owned hens, I basically, not like been full on hermit, but it's, you got to be home at 6 o'clock, and if you're going to leave, or if you're going to go to the Princeton Speedway or Cedar Lake Speedway, you got to go grab the chickens, stuff them in the coop, and shut the door, and then go head up to the Princeton Speedway. So there's a lot of added responsibility that it doesn't seem very hard, but it has an accumulative effect. So the other day it's about 6 o'clock, and it's pretty rare that I actually take an evening nap, but I laid down, I felt super tired and just super comfortable. I was like, I can't wait to go to sleep, and maybe I can wake up in time. Well, of course I was going to wake up in time to watch Star Trek, but I don't ever use an alarm clock or anything. So I laid down for about 5 minutes, and then I just remembered, I didn't close the chicken coop door yet. It wasn't quite dark yet, but it was getting there, and it's to the point where it's like I was so tired and run down that I could either rest for 5 more minutes, and then I'd sort of get the energy back to go out there, but I also ran the risk of prematurely falling asleep had I did rest for that 5 additional minutes. So relative to somebody digging ditches, yeah, this isn't a very arduous task, but I had to get out and get outside and briefly get out of my comfort zone just to make sure the door was closed and locked up. And those are little things you're going to have to do every day. You're going to want to let them out in the morning. You're going to want to let them out at night, especially in the summertime. It gets really super hot in the coop. Yeah, you need to make sure there's plenty of ventilation in there too. And the water needs to be changed more frequently. The thing with water too, add apple cider vinegar to the water. That acts as like a natural antibiotic. Anyone you talk to that knows about hens will probably tell you that that's a good decision. Not adding Samuel Adams. Samuel Adams probably would work as an antibiotic, so maybe in that instance it'd be a good decision. But it's probably just like 98% of the time Samuel Adams is a good decision. And then the other two, in this case when it comes to hen water, apple cider vinegar is a better decision. And I know you've seen that commercial that said they put oregano in the hen water too, and that might work, but one of the issues we might face is when you buy oregano from the store, it's probably 95% filler and 5% the actual oregano. So then it's just, who knows if it actually works or not. I mean, I sure wouldn't be able to tell you definitively whether it would work or not, but you can, yeah, I guess you can do it if it makes you feel good. I mean, oregano is cheap enough to buy. You can even mix oregano in with the food too. Or, if you get a meal, it's probably best in the water. If you are going to mix supplements or things of that nature, yeah, it's probably best just to mix it in with the water. Otherwise, if you throw it on the ground and they don't recognize it as a food, they're probably not going to eat it. So, yeah, definitely add apple cider vinegar to the water. And during the winter, during the winter time, the water obviously will freeze if it gets below freezing. So chickens don't need supplemental heat. There was about 2 weeks here where it got 20 below. I had all these pipes freezing, or if you leave your house for a few days, the pipes will freeze if you don't have the temperature turned up high or turned up to a certain temp point. So one of the chickens outside though was going through a molting process, which they don't get rid of all their feathers at once, but they get rid of a significant quantity of them, and then they look all bare and gross and like they're, like they got one step in death's door. So when they go through that molting process, then they don't have all the feathers for the added warmth. But what I found is, for the 2 weeks where it's 20 below, the brown hen went through that molting process. It's kind of shaking and shivering a little bit. Instinctively you might think, well, I should probably let them inside because if it's too cold out here. But the fact is, they need to be outside all the time so that they can slowly adapt to the changing conditions. Because if I was to bring them inside for a week, and then if it warmed up a little bit and I dumped them outside, they might die from that if their feathers aren't ready for it. So it's basically tough love is probably the best way to describe it. So tough love, you got to have a long-term outlook, and the short-term is painful for everybody, but long-term ultimately is what needs to be done. But yeah, the chicken survived just fine. I mean, she had her buddies to cuddle up with at night to stay warm, and just stayed in the coop out of the wind. So there's a window on the coop too, so the sun would shine in there. They would always lay in the sun too. That's another thing. If you're going to have a coop and you anticipate them being inside for long periods of time, sometimes multiple days, definitely put a south-facing window in it, because they always, and cats and dogs and all animals, they love the sun. They know it's healthy for them, it's good for them. Same with humans too. And they're always going to just lay down and relax and chill out when the sun is out, because that's their instincts. They know that the sun is the essence of their survival. Whether it's just warmth or all the rays and whatever else the sun provides us that we don't understand through current science. Maybe some divine information will help us understand it. But you definitely want to have that south-facing window in your coop for the hens. And not only that, it'll warm it up a little bit too. And don't really want to cut off all the venting in winter. I mean, you do want some air circulating through it. Unless if it's like some giant barn, then yeah, there's probably going to be some natural venting here and there just based on the size and magnitude and girth of it. But if you got some little shed that you're transition into a little chicken coop, then I mean, you don't need to drill holes in the door or nothing, but there's enough loose margins that there's probably going to be enough venting in the first place. But you don't need to go around and use silicone and try to seal everything up so that there's no air whatsoever moving through it, because that would probably be pretty unhealthy for the hens. And lastly, during the warm time of the year, when it's warm out, then dangerous bacteria can grow in the water. So you'll want to change it out more frequently and try to keep it in a cooler spot if possible. And during winter, I don't know if I said this clearly or not, but you only need supplemental heating for the water, just so the water stays liquid. You don't want to turn into solid. And hens, they don't need supplemental heating for comfort and survival. But some people, if they want the hens to continue laying eggs through the winter, then they just use a heating lamp, because not only does it's an artificial sort of light, it's also an artificial source of heat. So the chickens will be fooled into thinking that it's still technically springtime. What I've noticed though is if hens follow the natural cycle of life, they'll stop laying eggs in Minnesota. They'll stop laying eggs in late September, early October, and then they'll resume again probably late February, this time of the year, early March. So if you're completely dependent on eggs for survival, then yeah, do the heat lamp thing. But I mean, as far as longevity of the animals go, I'm not entirely sure what the best strategy is. I usually just take the minimalist approach and then just try to work together with nature, whatever. Whenever I try to work against nature, it generally doesn't work out very good. And yeah, I mean, it's obviously I don't have any long-term statistics to say, oh, if you don't use a heat lamp, then the chickens will lay eggs for 5 years longer than if you do use a heat lamp, or they'll die sooner, or et cetera, et cetera. Now, we're getting to the end of the show, so I just want to make a compendium of everything that I've said about raising backyard hens, or if you want to raise hens in your coffin apartment or your townhome or something. And if you're getting all stressed out about permits and stuff, in all reality, you could probably just get the hens. They're not going to act stupid. Then, unless you got one of those rogue neighbors that always calls people in, I don't think you're going to have any problems. Most neighbors around here, there's a few that seem to recognize they have hens, but I think for the most part, nobody even probably notices. And all right, so kind of got off on a tangent here. All right, I just need to stay focused. I mean, we're at the end of the show. It's completely disrespectful to the audience to go over an hour, so I just need to sum it up quick. So if you're going to get chickens, just get the chickens. I would recommend baby hens, raise them inside, and then move them outside. In the shelter, make sure it's big enough to where you can leave them in for a few days and they're comfortable. Have a perch up high where they can sleep. Have the nesting box with overhead protection and some type of padding and comfort, and that it's easy access for you to. Make it so that it's easy to clean. And if you have the floor in the chicken coop, make sure it's dirt so that they can scratch it and roll around in it during all times of the year. And during winter, it has to be dry dirt too, because if it's wet and it's organic and it's very black dirt, it'll freeze up and then it'll be hard to move around. And it does get dusty and dirty, but you can always just bring some snow in there and wipe stuff down with the snow. That'll help clean it off. And then make sure that the south-facing window. They prefer, if you only have a few hens, just feed them protein and fats. They absolutely love that. They'll love you and they'll love themselves. They'll love their country. They'll be able to do their part in making America great again, as long as they're healthy. And I think, yeah, it'll just be a good, fun, positive experience. Every time you go outside, they'll run to you. Their little two legs will be sprinting after you. It's probably the cutest thing you'll ever see in your life. I've seen cats and dogs, and hens are just as cute as them. So they're just as pet friendly too. I mean, if you have kids that are handling hens a lot, just make sure they wash their hands though, because hens, they do get feces on their feathers, and if you're handling them, you will get feces on your hand, and that's where the salmonella comes from. Yeah, it's important to understand that too, because salmonella is essentially just what's on the fecal matter. It's not that chickens just naturally produce salmonella and you have to pasteurize the eggs to get rid of it. It's when it comes into contact with the excrement. And you know, if you go outside and you do gardening or something, they will typically hang out with you. They'll want to hang out with you because when they have a guardian around them, there's no dangers of aerial predators. So they'll follow you around based on that. And you make sure you're willing to open the door in the morning. That doesn't mean you need to get up at 5 in the morning just to open the door. So whenever you feel like getting up to open the door, open it up. They'll make their funny noises and run outside, and they'll be happy to see you and all that. And then at nighttime, you absolutely do need to close the door at dark, you know, before dark. If you wait even a couple hours, you might get a raccoon or a possum, and a fox or a wolf or a gorilla or a hippopotamus, crocodile, maybe Bigfoot. If you know, if you wait too long, Bigfoot probably will show up. And the thing with Bigfoot too is he doesn't usually leave his mark. So I mean, he could easily just rip the door off and go inside and take him, but he's more coercive. You know, he's secretive in what he does. So if you leave the door open, then there's a far greater chance he will go into the coop too. Another way you can tell if Bigfoot is in the neighborhood is just look for the monster truck that says Bigfoot on it. It'll usually have like the tractor tires, and typically it's like an old Ford, like late 80s Ford, and it probably has American flags on the back. So if you see that truck in the neighborhood, then you absolutely need to be sure that the coop is closed, because you absolutely do not want him or any other predators getting into the coop. And with that, I think I'm going to have to wrap the show up, and I'm just glad to have you guys listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. I'm your parasite Rick Tex, and as far as the future show topics, you know, I can't really say that for sure. I mean, our producers were complaining to me because they thought that maybe the first episode might be dumbing down the viewers, and you know, if you guys feel that I'm dumbing you down, I profusely apologize. You know, I'm just trying to do this to feel like I'm making America great again by doing this. And you know, the producers, they give me these little research articles, and I'm supposed to follow the University of Minnesota cows fed grass and legume diet make better milk. So I mean, it's like, yeah, I get that it's common sense, and that's what we are: pro-human, pro-common sense. And people try some circuitous science to prove silly stuff all the time, but if you just stand back, excellent Stevie Nicks song, and then just view it from a common sense point of view, you will get the answers that you're looking for. And with that being said, we're going to be we're going to be having episode 3 in a couple days now, and thank you very much for listening. This is Tex Messages.